Not quite, okay, when it's red, yes, okay. Right, welcome to the meeting of the Victoria Hall Trust.
Have you live it?
Yes.
Yes, it's red, it's a
Yes.
little red thing.
Right.
Apologies, we've got apologies from Athena, who is being replaced by John Ball this evening, who's unwell. And we've got apologies from Dippy, who's also unwell. And Miriam Rice has 2 meetings, so she's coming in online to follow what's happening. Otherwise, I think that's it, isn't it?
Yes.
Keith? We'll introduce ourselves. You can see we've got name plates, but if you want to, we can introduce ourselves if we're asking a question or whatever. No urgent matters, I don't think, as far as I know, no. Declaration of interest? None. Any of us know? Minutes. So the minutes of the 8th of February, I'll sign those as so true and correct record if people are happy with that.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yes. So I signed that one. That one. Do you want me to do 2 or just one? It's fine. Thank you. Right. So reports. Helen, do we start with you? Or
I think
Probably
it would
with
be,
me.
yes.
well, sorry, Adam.
No problem.
This is Adam Wally.
I'm lead officer reporting to the trust. Nice to see you all. Thank you, Chair. I was going to propose, there's really 3 main parts of the report that I've written and circulated to you a week or so ago. So I was going to propose, Chair, if you want to, we could take them in the order, which would be, first of all, to seek the committee's agreement on the accounts for the 2022-23 period. Then we've got an update on the recent announcement of the closure of Ealing Town Hall. And lastly, a brief point on updates on where we are with the Charity Commission appeals process. So if you're okay with that, Chair, I'll...
Yes, that's fine. Go ahead then.
So moving on to the first item then, which is the accounts. So appended to the report was 2 appendices, which are fairly similar to the appendices of the last report you saw in February, which was the annual report and the Charity Commission format accounts return. Probably worth just for the record noting that the previous accounts that you approved in draft form at the last meeting in February were independently examined, considered to be in order, and was submitted in the form that you saw them, and the chair signed those off. So just for the record, I'm aware that the last update we had quite a detailed discussion about the way that the accounts were built up, and I wasn't proposing to put you through that again this evening, given that it was only about 6 months ago or so. So I'm very happy to take any questions if anyone wants to get into the detail of the accounts. But in summary, we've prepared accounts for a shorter financial year of 10 months, and that's proposed to bring the trust reporting year in line with the council's corporate reporting year, so running April to March. And committee might remember the original accounts will run from June to May because of the date of the registration of the charity. So we'll need to apply to the Commission to amend the reporting year to reflect that. So as I say, it will therefore be a shorter one-off 10-month year. And therefore we're bringing these to you. Obviously it's come relatively quickly after the last set of accounts, because what we also want to do is bring the accounts to you earlier in the year. So there's a bit of catching up, which is why they're coming around quite quickly straight after the last meeting. So so these accounts run from June of 2022 to March of 2023 this year. So it's a 10-month period. They've been produced by colleagues in the corporate finance team. I'm just checking. We were expecting a colleague to join, but unfortunately it seems she hasn't been able to, so I'm happy to talk to them if there are questions. So it's been prepared using the same methodology as the accounts you saw before, which is based on a set of actual income figures for the trust property over the period.
Sorry.
Pointing out Councillor Rice has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Councillor Rice, did you want to ask something?
Yes, please, if it's okay to interject, because I think Adam said if there's any questions about the accounts. I think really what's interestingly is the deficit and how the closure of the town hall will affect where the accounts are. Because can we just assume that we're going to stop, that we're going to stop generating costs that might add more to the deficit, or is it a case of we've still got costs? Maybe that we've got costs that could be related to the tribunal, for example. I'm just wondering where we are as a trust. Are we just going to stop building up this deficit? Are we going to be better off potentially? Because ironically, even though we're not actually holding events anymore.
Otherwise, we are actually on the closure of the town, the Victoria Hall yet. So can we wait till we get there? These are the last year's accounts we're talking about now that I signed off earlier, and how we would do them in future to fit in. So we're not really on that.
Oh, sorry, I probably jumped the gun because I lost the signal for a second. So I wasn't quite sure where we were. Sorry. Okay, thank you.
No, I think, Chair, we will certainly come back to that.
We'll come back to
when
that.
we come
Sorry,
to the
yes.
town hall, discussion. So, so as I say, the methodology is based on the same principles as the previous accounts, and I won't go into too much detail on this, but I have to take questions. But in summary, they're based on actual income that the trust property received over the period, with a mix of staffing and non-staffing overheads to the trust, which are apportioned on a mix of floor area and sort of usage sharing, pro-ratering for staff costs. And that has led to a further deficit over the reporting period of £168,791, which adds to the existing deficit that was reported to you in February, so leading to a total cumulative deficit of £4,000, £654,471,000. So as I say, the accounts are included, the details of the accounts are included in the appendices. We also have a draft annual report, which follows a fairly simple, it's the same template as the one that you were seeing in February, and a lot of the narrative there is similar, as you can imagine. So I think, Chair, I'll probably pause there and invite any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Chair. We've got
Chair, sorry, Catherine Ball.
Oh, Catherine has joined us now.
Councillor.
Catherine Ball is a colleague from Corporate
Oh,
Finance.
yes, okay, well,
If
that's
there are
helpful.
any questions.
Just say we do have Mr. Miller here, and I did answer an email to him yesterday and say that we didn't really want to talk about certain things until after we've had the court judgment. So just to let, and I'm sure you had that, so so we will perhaps talk to you in the future, but not just at the moment, if that's okay. And I think you'd asked to see the independent members as well, who were advised best to wait. So it's not that we don't want to talk to you, it's just that we're waiting. Does anybody want to talk about the present set of accounts, or ask the officer online or Adam about anything?
Yes, just one point. I know that the cost of the tribunal is in here at sort of 74,000, just over 74,000. Is there any more expected on that? Of course, the £10,000 as well carried over, so it's a total of 84,000. Are we expecting any more legal costs to be apportioned to the trust beyond that, or is that it now in terms of the hearing that's been brought by the Friends of Victoria Hall?
The answer is that's it for now. I mean, clearly, if the trust, depending on what might happen next, further proceedings, there's clearly I think we all hope it's the end of the process. But to answer your question, Councillor, there are no further costs associated with activity to date.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was Councillor Gareth Shaw, who can't quite see. Mr. Patterson.
Ian Patterson, independent member. You may have gone through this at the last iteration of accounts, Adam, but just as a reminder, the kind of chunky figure I'm looking at here is 98,000 and something for operating costs. Just to kind of feel what does that cover? It's a pretty big figure under one heading.
Yes, bear with me. Just detail on that. So give me, I'm just relying on my Excel to open. So the core operating costs that are essentially, the bulk of those costs are staffing costs related to security and cleaning of the building.
And they're separate presumably from the 40, nearly £50,000 of staff costs further up the list.
So yes, they are. So the costs further up the list, which are the, I think if I'm reading the same numbers as you, are the events team. So yes, the staffing, there are two separate sort of blocks of staff. There is the council's events team who provide sort of bookings and hiring facility for users of the bookings for the hall. So they are chargeable as part of their time for the work they do in Ealing Town Hall is chargeable to the trust. And then there is a separate line item, which is, I would say, is for cleaning and security costs for managing events.
And just going forward, I mean, I don't want to get into kind of ultra fine detail, and I know it's going to be a while before we get sensible accounts again because of closure of town hall, etc. But the kind of 4 or 5 headings here are kind of pretty catch-all in the sense you've got staff costs between cooperating and staff costs. You've got other direct costs and utilities in general, and I'm not absolutely clear kind of what exactly fits in. So a tad more detail under each heading when we start to get accounts in future would be really helpful, just so you can see what the differentials are. Would be helpful.
Absolutely. So there is another layer of detail which isn't included with this.
Certainly
This is the Charity Commission format for the accounts. There is I'm sort of mindful because, as I say, last time I think we gave a presentation with a bit more of a breakdown, and I was just aware last time there was quite a lot of detail, and I wasn't sure how much that was. So it's kind of slightly gone the other way, where maybe I've given you a little less. I'm sure, very happy
I'm
to.
sure the detail sits behind it.
I think you were
a little bit of further iteration.
Sure, so absolutely.
I think you were Gordian. We had very, very detailed breakdowns of all the costs at the last meeting. I'm not sure, we had them online, and I can't remember if we had them in paper as well or not, but we had a lot. And
I do remember the last meeting,
yeah.
it was quite detailed.
It was very
It's
detailed.
helpful just to-
I'd be happy to, if further, well, either if further details required for now, or we can arrange to circulate further details.
Yes,
That'd be helpful.
we could do what we had last time. That'd be
Yeah.
helpful, thank you. Are there any more questions to officers on this? No? Okay, thank you. If we go on to the next part of your presentation, then Adam.
So we could probably, this,
Yes, let the person go.
Yes,
yeah,
Yes.
this,
Catherine, thanks for joining, and you're free to go.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thanks very much.
So thanks, Chair. So yes, the next substantive item is regarding the closure of Ealing Town Hall. Helen sent an email to the committee about a week or so, I think just over a week ago. So it's a very recent announcement that's been made, the decision that's been taken by the council acting in its corporate capacity. I'll just briefly read the section that's in the report on the basis for this. And I should say we're joined virtually by a colleague from Corporate Facilities Management, Colin Holland, who I'll invite if there are questions for him. Invite the committee to make any queries in a moment. So the as the report notes, parts of Ealing Town Hall used for events and meetings. Again, this is the corporate council's sort of messaging on this. The parts of the Ealing Town Hall are not currently accessible for people with health conditions or impairments who are unable to use the stairs unaided. Following a recent health and safety inspection undertaken by external inspectors, it was found that due to the building's age, most of the internal Victorian and Edwardian fire stopping measures do not meet current standards. With these factors in mind, the decision to close Ealing Town Hall staff, councillors and visitors has been brought forward to October 2023. So I, as the committee, would appreciate Helen and I, as officers advising the trust, we're not involved in discussions in that decision, and so we had to prepare sort of written advice to you at a sort of fairly short notice in anticipation of the deadline to get this report out to you. And this ties in with the question that Councillor Rice was asking, which is to say that we haven't fully examine, and clearly, it's for you as the committee to direct us as the officers, and where you would like us to go with some of this, but we haven't had an opportunity to properly assess the impact of that decision on the trust. I mean, just as a sort of matter of fact, it's clearly, as we've just discussed under the finance item, the case that the council corporately provides the services that the trust is a beneficiary of, and obviously pays and contributes towards. So there's clearly a practical issue with the council, corporate council is free to, clearly to if it feels it's not able to continue to provide those services to suspend them. And similarly, as the previous item confirms, the trust is continuing to operate under a subsidy arrangement and isn't currently sustainable. So the corporate council is subsidising the trust. So as my report says, sort of provisional view from me is that see it as quite difficult to see a scenario where the trust can continue to operate as property under this situation. It would involve the trust having to find some alternative arrangement for it to operate outside of the corporate council's sort of facilities and events management services and all the things we've just touched on. And clearly there's also the matter that that the corporate council deemed it to be a health and safety risk, so the trust would have to take its own advice on that and would have to overcome those issues. So my sort of provisional recommendation is that we explore with the corporate council and again, this is to Councillor Rice's question, really, what the implications of that are for the trust. I mean, clearly a closure will therefore mean suspension of events and no source of income for the trust. But equally, one would expect there would be a significantly reduced overhead as well, because it's effectively a mothballed facility. But the detail of that, as I say, at this time isn't yet clarified, but it's something I'd be seeking your steer on and direction as far as where you'd like me to go next. Last quick point, as I say, it's referenced in the report, but it's clearly you as the committee, as you're aware, your role here is to act independently and in the interests of the charity and its beneficiaries. So clearly, you do need to be assured that you've considered this issue in through that lens. I have talked in the report about options for procuring independent advice, but again, it goes back to this issue of the limited resources that the trust has to be able to even take its own advice at this point in terms of the opportunity for continued independent use of its property. So as I say, we do have Colin Holland here from the corporate FM team. If there are any thought as a courtesy to the committee, you may want to ask questions on details. So Colin's here.
There's a row of questions coming up. Ian first, then Councillor Tarek Mahmood, and then Councillor Ball. Ian, over to you first.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the savings point was one I wanted to raise on.
If you wouldn't mind talking a bit louder, because it is online, so that
Sure,
people can hear.
the savings point was one I wanted to raise. I'm pleased it has been raised already. I just wanted to pick up the point, Adam, which you touched on yourself, which neither yourself nor Helen nor indeed the committee were involved in that decision. So I suppose my question is, should we have been? Now, in practical terms, I suspect there's not a lot we could have done. I mean, I haven't seen the report, but I suspect if the corporate council has decided to close the building, we probably would have to concur with that. But I do think we need to, keep the mindset embedded that there is corporate council property and there's our property, and when decisions are made which affects our property, we are at least involved in that, even if there isn't a practical thing we can do about it. So I suppose my question is, should we have been involved? Could we just put down a marker for that for the future about involvement?
I don't know if you have a view on that, Helen, from a legal.
Yeah, I will defer to you, Chair. I will defer to Colin, I think, for an answer, but my understanding of the chain of events was that as we know, building needs very significant work done to it. And that was recognised by the corporate council a long time ago. The first scrutiny report I remember seeing about it was in 2011. But once, once the corporate council had started down that line, procured mass funds and the trust agreed as well. It's very difficult to envisage a business case that would support the council spending the tens of millions, that are required to really put it straight, or even, make it more, keep it limping on. Now, I think the catalyst, well, I know the catalyst for the latest building report was there was something you may remember, there was a bit of the southeast, sort of turret fell off. And stonework, and there was something you made, others may not know if you don't go to the town hall, there was also some ceiling tiles fell down inside, which started, even though there'd been a survey not very long ago, and again Colin will confirm, saying that the building was just about okay for now. So that those two instances, rightly, I would say, prompted our corporate FM colleagues say, oh, this is making us a bit, red light here, we need to get an up-to-date service. So they did, they got that in May, June time, and then followed up with corporate health and safety colleagues who said, you need to be closing this down now. And so in terms of, did they consult with the trust about that? No, but what was it? Yeah, I'm not sure that there's an awful lot to say really.
No.
But I mean, Colin will.
Yeah, I'm not having seen the report, it's to be conclusive, but it sounds pretty certain to me we're going to reach this point at some point anyway, and we reached it earlier than planned, and I'm sure it probably was the right decision, and it probably wasn't a practical alternative. I think the only point I'm raising for kind of propriety point of view, it feels to me like it should have been a decision that was made jointly. And I think we need to kind of maintain that position as we go along, rather than go back to the position which we found ourselves in a few years ago, where the trust had effectively been subsumed into the running of the council. It's a narrow point of it. I do think it's important. Which in practical terms, I suspect there's not what we can do about it, and I accept that.
No, I think we will minute your point, Ian, though, that's fair enough. Tarek?
Yeah, just to quickly, just want to know, how often do we do the health and safety, building health and safety survey?
That might be a question, Colin, if you heard that, I'd refer to you.
Okay, so in terms of health and safety, there are a number of inspections that are undertaken under different statutory health and safety headings. One of the key ones of which, of course, is fire, and the building is subject to a fire safety risk assessment on a biannual basis. The last one of which was undertaken at the beginning of this year, which did identify a number of significant hazard issues relating to fire compartmentalization and circulation and safe evacuation routes, particularly for those with mobility issues. And this, together with the near miss incidents that Helen was referring to, involving the stonework and the ceiling collapse internally, led to quick action by ourselves in undertaking or commissioning a third party to do an independent building survey piece of work, which resulted in significant findings which would attract a considerable amount of cost to rectify, and that was then referred up to council leadership for the decisions that have been taken, that Adam has referred to in the report, and I believe has been circulated and communicated to the trust.
Thank you. Is that one?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I read the health and safety condition report, and in a number of sections, it raised potential concerns relating to fire safety, but what it was proposing was that there was specialist fire safety advice on what would need to be done to rectify that. And has the council corporately, or will the council corporately get that detailed advice in order to be able to determine what the costs would be of dealing with those issues? I mean, well, I suppose, yeah, the subdivision of that is that something the council would do prior to tribunal decision, or is that something that it would do dependent on particular results of the tribunal decision?
We did take advice from our head of fire safety, David Rolson, who advised that there would be considerable cost in the rectification actions that would be required to bring the building as it is up to current regulatory standard and safe for safe usage, etc. The work to undertake the detail of these costs has not been undertaken, however, with a view that such issues will be addressed under the planned renovation and refurbishment work with the Mastercraft project.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, can I come
Do you
back
want
to
to come
that?
back?
But yeah, I mean, okay, just sort of more specifically the last bit, really. So I know we don't want to get into what's happening at the tribunal, but if the Mastercraft scheme doesn't go ahead for whatever reason, then would there then be automatically going into the costings for that via rectification work?
That would be the case as I would see it, yes.
I think we'd have no choice,
Do that.
but we'd have to do something, yes, that's quite complicated. Ellen?
Chair, I think I wouldn't have thought the corporate council would want to have a commitment on record that they would definitely do that survey if the tribunal doesn't go in the way that we hope. I suspect what the council, corporate council will do in that scenario would be to commission some options appraisal, which may or may not, would probably include costings for safety works, but might not, depending on what's the preferred, what the understanding of, because quite clearly, as I'm here advising the trust, not the council, but I am a local resident and council taxpayer, and I would not want the council spending giving the money on a survey if it was not required, if there was no reason to
I probably phrased that wrongly, Helen. What I should have said, if we intended to keep using the building, obviously we might not have any choice, but I don't think we probably would. We'd be looking, if, say, for example, someone hypothetically said that the Mastercraft deal fell through, we'd probably be looking for new partners, I would imagine. We'd probably go out or start the whole process, unfortunately, all over again, but this is not real wood, don't think, but hopefully that's not the case. But we're here as the trust, and obviously if it's said that it's not safe, well, I think we're in a circumstances where I, for example, can't walk very fast, and so if there was a fire in the kitchens or something, somebody would have to give me, 2 people would probably have to give me a fireman's lift or carry me out or something, so I wouldn't be able to get out very fast, and you probably wouldn't let me in, from now on. But and you obviously wouldn't want to have weddings or something with that hanging over us, I shouldn't think. Which I think, do we want to ask Colin any more questions, anybody? Tarek, did you want to? Sorry, go on then, Tarek.
Yeah, just quickly on that one, I don't know, is it the point to ask that question, but I just wanted to confirm, I'm sure if the officer you are continuously in touch with Mastercraft, are they completely aware about our bridge that we have taken to closure of?
It's a regular question you ask every time.
They are not tracking, they're there.
So I should stress as ever that I'm not in direct, I'm not acting as the negotiator with Mastercraft, but I understand that recent conversations have been had with Mastercraft and the decision to close the town hall, which is a matter on public record anyway, has been discussed with them, and the feedback I've had from colleagues who are still, you know, while leaving those discussions and have that dialogue, is that Mastercraft remain in the deal, so to speak.
After that,
Yes.
Councillor Shaw?
yeah, thanks, Chair. And just really, I think for the trustees, we need to consider just the option of our own independent examination that you presented in your reports, which I appreciate. So I suppose the question really is for Colin online, which is obviously this was an independent assessment, risk assessment that was done on the town hall. You know, have you any reason to think that another one would come to a different conclusion?
Not at all, councillor. The commission of the surveying work that was undertaken was through a third-party registered firm of chartered surveyors who are completely independent of the council, and we had commissioned for the first time to do this piece of work, having not used them in previous times.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was sort of worth us just putting that sort of formally on a public record, because then, you know, certainly to my mind as a trustee, I don't think there's any justification in spending further money on another independent report.
I think what Councillor Ball meant would, how much would it cost to fix?
Yes.
That was, I think that's what you were
Yeah,
suggesting.
yeah,
wasn't
that's
it? It
right.
wasn't saying have another survey, because obviously buildings are 135 years old, and I think that's what you meant, but I'm glad you made that clear, that it was an independent survey. Thank you. Helen, did you want to say
Yes,
something?
it's not, it's more actually, as the trust committee has benefit of Colin here. I would actually welcome Colin's input on the question that has kept coming on, particularly with the parties over the years, which is whether the trust property could reasonably be opened and run independently of the rest of the building. The rest of the building has been having said that my admittedly my quick glance through the condition survey showing quite a few problems in the trust property, you know, but would it be feasible for the trust property to operate without any support from the rest of the town hall, you know, just as an island, really? I think that was a point that has come up several times.
Okay. If I can answer that then, Helen, for a number of reasons, the answer would be no. I would start off with the prime reason, with the location of the trust property within the town hall, which access to and from requires, particularly in terms of fire escape routes through other parts of the building, and access through and into cannot avoid the remainder of the building. There's also issues around utilities which are provided to the entire building and cannot be provided in isolation to the trust areas within the building. And practical reasons around that include the generator, water, utility income, and provision and distribution within the building. Safe access for larger events needs to be via the town hall atrium, which will not be possible in terms of circulatory routes, fire compartmentalisation issues and hazards that have been identified in the surveyor's report, and for reasons of insurance issues and security, staffing, FM staffing, etc. Cannot all be operated in isolation of where these rooms are located.
Thank you, Colin, for that. Any more questions, Colin, while he's with us? No. Thank you very much, and we'll release you. Thank you. Very kind.
Thank you, Chair.
And then Adam, your last section.
Thank you, Chair. I might hand over to Helen for some of this, but just to bring the sort of report to a close, and the sort of that item. The last item, which is going to be very brief, was because it's sadly not, as everyone I think is aware, is not, and it's in my report, not a great deal to say by way of an update on the tribunal. So we still wait as of, well, one being say for the record, because the last time we met, as you all remember, was 2 weeks before the hearing. So it's probably worth just for the record noting that the hearing did take place in February. Helen and I gave evidence over those as part of that 3-day hearing. And as Helen's recently reminded me, the judge indicated that he would treat the matter with urgency and would get back to us as quickly as possible. And we're now into September and still waiting. So it's a highly obviously unsatisfactory position to be in. I think beyond just noting that, Chair, clearly if people want to ask a question, we're very happy to go into detail of, you know, a question about the hearing or where we now stand, but we just obviously caution that, you know, we probably have to go into private session if that were the case.
I think you did send us out details of when you attended, so everyone on the panel did have those details, and I don't think you can tell us much more, and we're just all waiting, aren't we, basically? Is that right?
I think, yeah, just saying, Mr. Miller, one of the two appellants is here, and we disagree on the subject of, you know, the dispute of the tribunal. But I think one thing we are absolutely in agreement on is where is this judgment? You know, and I think firstly, I think 7 months is outrageous.
Yeah, I think we would all.
The trust, and I did just to reassure you, I've written a number of times to the tribunal to ask first, and I have copied in this each time. The first time in April, a couple of months after the tribunal hearing, the 3-day hearing, I received rather snippy, if I might use that legal technical phrase, response from the tribunal office saying that you know, they're told not to chase the judges, and judges, you know, working hard and respected the assistant, his assistant judges, etc. The judgment coming soon. I then chased again, and so that was, you know, we're told soon in April. I did speak to the Charity Commission separately and privately, and they told me they were seeing about 6 months back. So I chose to believe the Charity Commission on that rather than the tribunal office. So, you know, made a mental diary, you know, for August. I chased the tribunal again in August and came back with rather different this time. Yes, we too have noticed, you know, it's hit at time alert, and we have written to the judge to ask him, you know, what's happened for an update. More. I then wrote, in anticipation of this meeting, I wrote again last Friday, not Thursday, pointing out the trust was now suffering adverse hardship, because this was immediately after the building, the announcement been made, the building had been closed, and the hardship was directly and adverse impacts on potential beneficiaries of the trust. And this was directly related, in my view, to the fact that the trust wasn't able to progress solutions to secure its long-term future. And the response I got back this latest time was, I'm going to pass, I will pass your letter on to the judge. So a slight, you know, a nuanced change in approach from the tribunal office, but the outcome is the same, which is that we ain't got a judgment yet.
Councillor Ball, did you want to ask Helen a question?
Yes, Chair. Well, so what I was going to ask was whether we've got any indication of when it'll come, but I'm clear from that answer we don't. But what I'll ask instead is that there are some other matters which are in dispute between, certainly between the council and the the appellants in the case, like for instance, the extent of the trust properties, is any and that aren't covered by the tribunal. Is there any attempt being made to have any sort of discussions to look at other matters not covered by the that won't be covered by the judgment when it does appear?
Councillor, we've talked about this before, and it's fractional. I mean, it's sort of how much space and so on. We walked round, and it's very difficult because of plans and how long they've been in existence and so on. Adam, did you want to help there? We've looked at this, but really, to be honest, until there's a judgment,
I might.
however much it is,
Yeah,
it's not going to make much difference.
Thank
I don't
you,
think that
Chair.
would
Just
be.
to say that this matter was covered, not in huge detail, but Adam did address the issue in his evidence. We don't know what the judge is going to say about this, but my advice is that unless and until we see that judgment and look at it, it would not be appropriate to be having further discussions with the parties to litigation, basically. So and the time for mediation on any subject in my view would be before we got to the tribunal. But certainly at this stage, I mean, the other point to make, of course, is that the mediation of any sort takes resource. Whether it's officer time or the employment of the mediator, not this should be determined if the council, the trust doesn't actually have any resources entirely dependent on the board of council. And the other thing is, in terms of the extent of the trust property, that also impacts the extent of the corporate council's retained land. So any discussions would necessarily have to include the corporate council as well as the trust, because more for the trust equates to less for the corporate council. It's not that simple. It's very complicated, and it does touch on matters that were before the tribunal. And whereas you may decide you're happy to discuss this now, or even go to private session and have a discussion. My advice would be to wait until we see what the judge has to say. The time he's making us wait, we've got to imagine that he's writing quite a detailed judgment. So
Thank you.
We'll just say, I think in all practical terms, we have to take one step at a time. That's where we are. I think also, to go back to our previous point, that right now, wherever we might draw the red lines on the map and argue that that's the corporate councils and that's the trusts, it's closed anyway. So it really doesn't matter for now just where those lines are, because there can be no further progress with the building until first of all we've got the judgments, which can then decide what happens, and then at that next point there'll have to be some sort of decision on what is happening with the building in relation to the judgments and any rectification works that may or may not need doing. So I don't really think it's for us to consider that at this point in time. I'm sure it will be at a point in the future.
I think so. I'd agree. Okay. Miriam, are you all right there? I think she is. She lets us know. Tarek, did you want to come in? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question has already been answered, and I just wanted to know, tribunal and judge, they are, like you rightly mentioned, that you mentioned to them the trust is experiencing hardship and the town hall has been closed. So they,
I didn't say the town hall had been closed, but I said the trust was experiencing hardship as a family result of the delay.
It's because obviously we can't rent out, Tarek. We won't be able to rent out the town hall, the Victoria Hall, I should say, if we're shut. So it's even more hardship. Our costs will mount. Yes.
There is no way of just receiving income.
No. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's all right, that's
Yeah.
all right. Maybe we didn't make it quite clear. Okay, I think that's, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry it's so depressing, and we don't know when we'll get this judgment. Can we note and agree the recommendations as being presented to us by officers? Can we do that?
Yeah.
Yes, with a heavy heart, obviously, but it's all we can do at the moment. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone for coming along. And we're sorry we're in this little room, but at least we're somewhere. So thank you. And I don't know, will we meet again when we know something or?
Well, there is a forward plan for me. I'm not sure when the date of the next meeting. I don't think you know off the top of your head, Keith, but it's probably in.
Well, you'll tell us, so we don't
The
really.
minute tells me March the 24th. So.
So hopefully we'll know by then.
No.
Is it- or is it on here a bit?
There was a November meeting down.
Next,
14 March.
Oh, 14.
14th of March. Well, hopefully we'll have an idea by then.
I'm sure we will.
I'm sure we will. Fingers crossed. Well, thank you to everybody and thank you for coming along. Thank you.
I just say thank you to everybody, and it is obviously extremely frustrating. And so, obviously, thank you again to officers for trying to get us through this process. I think I'll just add that, I'm still here.